Imagine the highest peak of human fortune, absolute power, limitless pleasure, a destiny guaranteed by birth. What kind of truth could possibly be worth sacrificing everything for? 2,500 years ago, when kingdoms fought for land and priests fought for heaven, a boy was born into a palace of endless comfort and unending noise. He asked a question no one dared to ask. Why do we suffer, even when we have everything? Not about gods, not about heaven, but about us. He was born a prince, surrounded by power, luxury, and devotion. Yet in the midst of it all, he felt an emptiness deeper than the silence of the night. And one day he walked away from his palace, his family, his destiny, to seek something greater than glory, truth. For years the world forgot his name. But when he returned, he carried no sword, no kingdom, no wealth, only a realization that would change humanity forever. This is not mythology. This is the story of a human being who looked within and awakened the world. Gautama Buddha, the prince who awakened the world. "2,500 years ago, India was not a single land. It was a map of fire. Dozens of kingdoms, rising, falling, fighting. Kings built cities of gold and burned them to ash in the same breath. Power was everything. Peace, a forgotten word. Yet beneath the chaos, another war was being fought, not on the battlefield, but in the mind. Brahmins recited hymns to the heavens. Ascetics starved in forests seeking the divine. Merchants traded gold by day and prayed for salvation by night. Everyone searched for meaning, but no one agreed on what truth was. A man's worth was decided by his birth, a woman's fate by her husband's name. The poor bowed to the rich, and the rich bowed to fear. The world worshipped gods, but understood nothing of suffering. And in that age of noise, of rituals, wars, and endless questions, a single life was about to begin. One that would turn the search inward. One that would ignite a revolution of the soul. In the small kingdom of Kapilavastu, a dream changed everything. Queen Maya Devi saw a white elephant descend from the heavens, pure, calm, and radiant, and it entered her womb. The wise men called it a sign, a symbol of purity, greatness, and awakening yet to come. Months later, during a journey to her parents' home, Maya stopped to rest in a garden of sal trees, Lumbini. There, surrounded by silence, the future Buddha was born. They say the earth trembled softly. Lotus flowers bloomed out of season. And the queen looked upon her child with a peace that words could not hold. But the peace did not last. An old sage, asceta, arrived at the palace. He gazed at the infant's face, serene, unmoving, and wept. When the king asked why, asceta said, "This child will become either a great emperor or a great spiritual teacher. He will rule the world or renounce it." The king smiled at first, then fear crept in. He did not want a monk, he wanted an heir. From that moment he swore the boy would never see pain, never know sorrow, never question the world he was born to rule. But fate listens to no vows. Shortly after the birth, Queen Maya passed away, leaving behind a newborn prince and a prophecy that whispered through every corridor of the palace. The prince's life began with a promise and a loss. The prince grew in a world without shadows. Music filled the mornings, perfume drifted through the halls. Every corner of the palace whispered luxury. King Suddhodana had 3 palaces built, one for summer, one for winter, one for the rains, so his son would never feel discomfort, never glimpse decay. The boy's every wish was met before it became a thought. His laughter echoed through gardens and the world bowed before him. But somewhere behind that laughter, silence waited. Siddhartha's mother had died, and his aunt, Prajapati, raised him with a love that tried to fill that void. Yet even as a child, he looked beyond the palace walls, as if something invisible was calling his name. He watched the world carefully, the way servants moved, the way the poor bowed a little too long, the way happiness seemed to fade as quickly as a song. He began to ask questions about life, about suffering, about why joy never lasted. The elders smiled and said, "The king will explain one day." But answers never came. And in the middle of every feast, in the heart of every celebration, the prince felt it, a quiet emptiness that gold could not cover. He had everything a man could desire, everything except truth. But one day, the palace gates would open, and the illusion would break. For 29 years, the prince had lived inside a perfect lie. No sickness, no sorrow, no death. The palace walls had kept the world out and kept him blind within. But one morning, Siddhartha asked to see his city, to know the people he was meant to rule. The king hesitated, then ordered the streets to be cleaned, the sick hidden, the old kept away. Only joy was to be seen that day. But truth has a way of slipping through even the strongest walls. As the chariot moved through the streets, Siddhartha saw something he had never seen before. A man, bent and trembling, hair white as ash, his hands shaking as he struggled to stand. Siddhartha turned to his charioteer, Channa. "What is wrong with him?" Channa answered softly. "He is old, my lord." Age comes for all of us. The prince fell silent, all of us. Days later, he ventured out again. This time, he saw a man writhing in pain, coughing, weak, near death. "What has happened to him?" Siddhartha asked. Channa said, "He is sick. No one escapes sickness, my lord." Something inside the prince shifted. If youth fades, if health fails, what remains? On his third journey, he saw a still figure being carried on a wooden frame. Garlands around him, tears in the eyes of those who followed. Siddhartha's voice trembled. "What sleep is this?" Channa bowed his head. "It is not sleep, my lord. It is death." The world seemed to stop. The laughter of his youth, the music of his palace, all turned hollow in a single breath. Later, on a fourth journey, he saw a man in saffron robes, walking barefoot, calm and unafraid. No jewels, no servants, just peace. "Who is he?" Siddhartha asked. Channa replied, "A monk, my lord. One who seeks an end to suffering." For a long moment, the prince watched him disappear into the distance, and a question rose from somewhere deep within. If all beauty fades, what then is worth pursuing? That night, Siddhartha could not sleep. He had seen what no walls could hide: age, sickness, death, and the possibility of freedom. He had seen death and could no longer live blind. The palace slept, but the prince did not. That night, a new cry echoed through the halls: the birth of his son. They named him Rahula, the fetter, a chain of love meant to hold the prince to the world he was born to rule. Siddhartha looked at the child, tiny, perfect, innocent, and felt the pull of two worlds. One, the world of warmth and belonging. The other, the endless unknown calling from beyond the palace walls. Rain whispered outside. The torches flickered low. Even the air seemed to wait for his decision. He walked to the room where Yasodhara and Rahula slept. For a long time, he stood in silence. He wanted to hold the child once, just once. But he knew, even that would bind him. To leave everything you love, he thought, for the truth you can't yet see, that is the price of awakening. He turned away. Outside, his loyal charioteer Channa waited with his horse, Kanthaka. Neither spoke. The prince removed his ornaments, the gold, the jewels, the marks of a life he no longer claimed. He drew his sword, not to harm, but to sever, and cut his hair. Then, as the rain fell, he mounted his horse. The palace lights faded behind him, and the road ahead disappeared into darkness. He did not look back. The prince was gone. The seeker was born. Siddhartha walked away from the palace and into a wilderness of seekers. Across the Ganges Valley, hermits, philosophers, and ascetics filled the forests. Each claimed to hold the key to truth. Each offered a path and a price. He went to the masters of meditation, Arada Kalama, then Udraka Ramaputra. They taught him silence, stillness, the art of dissolving thought. He followed every word. He reached the highest states they knew. And yet, when he opened his eyes, the same question remained. Peace of mind is not freedom of soul, he realized. So he left again. This time, he joined 5 ascetics who sought salvation through suffering. They denied the body, believing pain could cleanse desire. Siddhartha followed them into the depths of deprivation. He ate almost nothing. He slept on bare earth. His ribs pressed against his skin. His breath grew weak, his thoughts dim. For 6 long years he lived as a shadow, half spirit, half skeleton. The world faded into haze, and one morning, as the sun rose pale over the forest, he collapsed by the riverbank, too weak to stand, too hollow to pray. He had gone beyond luxury, beyond comfort, beyond need. But what he found was not truth, only the edge of death. He had killed his body, trying to free his spirit. By the river Niranjana, the seeker lay still. The wind moved through the grass like a whisper of memory. His body was bone and breath, his mind an echo. He had given up everything, even hope. And then, footsteps. A young village girl named Sujata saw him beneath the tree. She thought he was a spirit, a silent god of the forest. Moved by kindness, she brought him a bowl of milk and rice. He looked at it for a long time. For 6 years, he had refused every comfort, believing suffering was sacred. But now, he saw the truth hidden in her offering. He accepted the bowl and drank. The milk was warm. The body remembered life. The ascetics watching from afar gasped. To them, he had broken his vow. To him, he had broken his chains. In that moment, Siddhartha understood. Truth did not live in extremes, not in indulgence, not in torment. The answer lay between a path of balance, awareness, and compassion. Neither luxury nor pain brings freedom, he thought. Only understanding does. He had failed as a prince and as a saint, but he was now ready to awaken as a human. He walked until his strength returned, and when the path ended, he found a tree, a Bodhi tree, tall and silent, its roots deep in the earth. Siddhartha sat beneath it and made a vow. I will not rise from this place until I find the truth. Days passed. The sun burned, the nights froze, but he did not move. Then, in the stillness, the last great test began. Mara came, not as a demon, but as every shadow of the mind. Doubt whispered, "You will fail." Fear hissed, "You will die." Desire smiled, "You could still return to power, to pleasure, to love." The storm rose around him, thunder, darkness, the pull of every temptation, but within that chaos, stillness. The illusions shattered. Mara's armies vanished like smoke. The night grew quiet once more, and as the first light touched the horizon, Siddhartha opened his eyes and saw the world as it truly was. He saw that everything changes, that every joy, every sorrow, every life is bound to another, a web of causes and effects with no beginning and no end. He saw that craving is the root of suffering, and freedom lies not in escaping life, but in understanding it. And with that realization, the search was over. He whispered, "My emancipation is secured. This is my last birth." The earth was silent, the tree stood still, and the man who had been a prince was now something greater. The prince had died. The Buddha had risen. Weeks passed after enlightenment. Silence followed him wherever he went. The man who had conquered himself now walked as one beyond fear, beyond doubt. But his heart was not at rest, for what he had seen could not remain his alone. He thought of the 5 ascetics who had once followed him, the men who had turned away when he broke his fast. They were still wandering, still seeking, still lost. So he walked to Isipatana, the deer park near Sarnath, and found them there. When they saw him approach, they whispered among themselves. "He abandoned the path," one said. "He cannot have found truth." But as he came closer, they saw something they could not name, a calm that no suffering could touch. Without a word, they bowed, and under the shade of trees he spoke for the first time. He said, "There is suffering. It is universal. Birth, sickness, loss, and death. None are free from it." He paused. "The cause of suffering is desire, the endless craving that binds us." He looked at each of them, steady, gentle. When desire ends, suffering ends. And there is a path, a way between indulgence and denial, the middle way. It is a path of right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The noble eightfold path, the road that leads not to heaven, but to freedom. The 5 men listened, and their resistance dissolved. For the first time, they saw not a prince, but a teacher. They became his first disciples, and from that moment, the Sangha was born. And as his words echoed through the forest, something unseen began to move. For the first time, the wheel of Dharma began to turn. Weeks turned into months, and the Buddha, now known as the Awakened One, took his first steps on the road. He carried no scroll of dogma, only the realization he had found beneath the Bodhi Tree. He walked the dusty roads of northern India for 45 years, from dawn until dusk, from village to village, from the courts of kings to the huts of untouchables. He didn't seek followers. He sought to share the understanding that had freed him, and the world listened. Kings bowed to him, like King Bimbisara of Magadha, offering parks for his community to gather. Wealthy merchants became patrons, and scholars who had spent their lives debating philosophy fell silent before his simple, undeniable truth. His message dissolved the hard lines of a rigid society. Birth, caste, and wealth meant nothing to the Dharma. It wasn't a religion of conversion, but a revolution of individual understanding. He took the most terrifying figures and showed they were just seeking what everyone else sought. The notorious bandit, Angulimala, who wore a necklace of his victim's fingers, threw down his sword and staff, drawn by the Buddha's silence. He became a monk. The movement grew, formalizing into the Sangha, a community built on shared principles and compassion. Yet, the Buddha's genius was not only in his personal realization, but in his inclusivity. When his aunt, Mahapajapati, stood at the gates of the community, asking to renounce the world, the Buddha initially hesitated. But he soon understood that the path to awakening could not be reserved for men alone. The first female monastic order, the Bhikkhuns, was established, a radical concept for that age, affirming that the ultimate truth was accessible to all. He ruled no kingdom, yet his teaching changed empires. He commanded no army, yet his wisdom conquered the human heart. But even the Enlightened One, the man who had mastered the laws of existence, could not escape the final universal truth of the path he taught. The law of impermanence comes for all. For 45 years, the voice of the Buddha had echoed across the land, guiding a generation toward freedom. But now, after decades of walking, teaching, and serving, his body began to fail. He was in his 80th year. He walked toward a small town named Kusinagara. Even as his health faded, his mind remained perfectly clear. He knew his final moments were approaching, not as a tragedy, but as the natural end of a conditioned life. His last offering of food came from a simple blacksmith named Kunda. Aware of his nearing death, the Buddha took his final meal and continued his journey to a grove of sal trees. His disciples, who had devoted their lives to his side, gathered around him. They were filled with grief, yet also awe, witnessing the perfect composure of a man who had conquered fear. They wept, asking for final instruction, for someone to lead the Sangha after his passing. The Buddha looked upon them, steady and gentle, and gave his ultimate teaching, the final, inescapable truth. Do not look to any one person for guidance. The Dharma I have taught, let that be your teacher. And then, his final words, simple yet profound, echoing the first question he had asked in his youth. All conditioned things are impermanent. Decay is inherent in all things. Strive on with diligence. He lay down between two sal trees as the sun began to set, and the leaves around him drifted to the earth. There was no struggle, no sorrow, only the vast, deep silence of a mind that had found its final rest. The prince who had sought truth, the seeker who had awakened the world, now passed into parinirvana, the ultimate freedom beyond birth and death. The flickering lamps of his disciples cast long shadows across the trees. The story of a man's life had ended, but the path he illuminated had just begun. The life of the Buddha was a human story, but his teachings became an unbroken current of history. Within 3 centuries of his passing, the path he illuminated moved from the quiet forests of India to become a world-changing force. The Emperor Ashoka the Great, struck by the suffering caused by war, abandoned conquest and embraced the Dharma. He inscribed the Buddha's message of nonviolence and compassion onto pillars and rocks, sending missions not with soldiers, but with monks across Asia, to Sri Lanka, to the coasts of Southeast Asia, and along the Silk Road toward China. Buddhism evolved, but its core truth remained a steady anchor. It adapted to jungles and mountains, manifesting in the gilded temples of Thailand, the silent Zen gardens of Japan, and the profound philosophies of Tibet. Today, the message of the Buddha does not reside solely in temples. 2.5 millennia later, modern science has begun to echo the prince's ancient realization. The concepts of mindfulness, the focus on present awareness and compassion, the wish for all beings to be free from suffering, are no longer just spiritual practices. They are evidence-based tools taught in classrooms, hospitals, and corporate centers. The great law he discovered, impermanence, is no longer a fear to be escaped, but a foundation for acceptance, proving that the solution to suffering is not to change the world, but to change our relationship with it. He asked a question no one dared to ask. Why do we suffer? And the answer he gave continues to resonate in the heart of every human being who seeks silence amidst the noise. 2.5 millennia ago, one man sat under a tree and changed the course of human thought. Empires fell, kingdoms faded, but his silence still speaks.